Module 3. Editing and Presenting Research Paper. Lecture 2. Presentation Skills. Part 2. Preparing to present. Use of PowerPoint slides and other visual aids. The lecture covers the issue of how to present your talk along with visual aids and PowerPoint slides. In other words, we are going to be talking about how you can display your material visually. The objective of this lecture is to examine types, goals, advantages and disadvantages of visuals. Hopefully, the lecture will help you use visual aids in your oral presentations to achieve the best impact. To introduce you to the topic and brush up on your presentation skills, I'd like to start off with a couple of warm-up activities. First, decide whether the following pieces of advice on preparing slides are things you should do or things you shouldn't do. Use bullet points rather than continuous text. Use different fonts within a slide. Use a simple font like Times New Roman or Arial. Use as many illustrations as possible. Use a light text on a dark background. Use capital letters for all the text. Use 3 to 5 points per slide. Now identify the positive and negative features of the following slides. If these tasks seem the areas where you feel puzzled or weak, this lecture will be a simple and useful guide to preparing PowerPoint slides and other visual aids. So, my first point concerns using visual aids. Visual aids can be a very powerful tool to enhance the impact of your presentations. Words and images presented in different formats can appeal directly to your audience's imagination, adding power to your spoken words. Think of using visual aids for the following reasons. If they say words, don't describe your results, show them. If their impact is greater than the spoken word, don't describe an image, show it. There are many different types of visual aids. Tables, diagrams, charts, graphs, photographs, drawings, video sequences, and so on. Words and images can be used throughout your presentation from introduction to conclusion. For example, to indicate the structure by listing your main points, support information with clearly displayed data, to offer evidence from your research to support your argument, to present your conclusion in a succinct phrase or image, and so on. However, remember to restrict their use to key moments in your presentation. An overuse of visual aids can be hard to follow. Do not include visuals simply to fill space or make your document look colorful. This leads directly to my next point, designing PowerPoint slides and other visual aids. What we intend to do in this part of the lecture is to focus on how to create slides that will be easy for your audience to read and understand. As the name suggests, PowerPoint forces you to think of your main points and organize them. Preparing slides that illustrate the logic of your presentation helps you separate the main points from the supporting details, and the slides keep you focused as you give your presentation. Your audience follows your ideas not only because you have established a clear principle of organization, but also because the slides on the presentation screen remind people of where you are in your talk, what point you are addressing, and how that point fits into your total scheme. PowerPoint is widely used across the world, so it is worthwhile learning to use it. There is a number of features to consider when designing effective PowerPoint slides. One thing you'll deal with is using color. Be consistent. Ensure that all your slides have the same or similar background images and color schemes. PowerPoint's design templates can be used for this. Prepare slides that use a bold color contrast, for example, black or deep text on a cream background or vice versa. Avoid using red or green for text or highlighting, as it can be difficult to read. Another important thing about preparing slides is using text. Avoid using too much text. Slide overload is bad because people will then spend time reading the slide rather than listening to a presenter. A useful guideline is the rule of 6, which means slides should have no more than 6 bullet points, maximum 6 lines per slide, and each bullet point should be no more than 6 words long, maximum 6 words per line. Don't mix up your fonts and font sizes. Too many variations in font size and type can be visually confusing. Use a simple font like Times New Roman or Arial. Set clear hierarchies for type size to help your audience distinguish between headings, main text, and other types of text. Use a big enough font. Ensure that your headings are at least 32 points, text is at least 18 points. Otherwise, it may be difficult to read on screen. Use bold for a clear and simple form of emphasis and headings, rather than uppercase, italics, or underlining. Choose left align for all text to make it easier to read. I'd also like to draw your attention to some more visual aids which might help you present your argument to results in a stimulating way and add emphasis to your spoken words. This may involve using such visual aids as tables and diagrams, also called figures, that enable authors to present a large amount of information efficiently and to make their data more comprehensible. Let me elaborate on each visual listed. Tables show detailed pieces of information, especially facts or numbers, by arranging them in rows and lines across and down a page. As tables arrange data systematically, they can convey information more succinctly than text can. There are many different types of diagrams or figures used to present data to an audience. A figure may be a chart, a graph, a photograph, a drawing, or any other illustration or non-textual depiction. The most commonly used are charts and graphs. Charts show proportions. Graphs typically display the relationship between two quantitative indices. Now let me give you a brief overview of the most common types of charts used in research papers. Pie charts show fractions and percentages, relate to one another, and make up a whole. Flow charts are diagrams which generally display non-quantitative information, such as the stages of a process or the flow of subjects through a process. Bar charts are diagrams in which different amounts are represented by thin vertical or horizontal bars which have the same width, but vary in height or length. Bar charts are useful to show measurable values such as amounts or percentages. The longer the bar, the greater its value. Dot charts are figures used to show the presence or absence of relationship between two variables. Values of two variables are displayed in the form of dots. Graph is an effective way of showing several numbers together and demonstrating the relationships or differences between them. Graphs can convey two aspects of experimental data. First, they convey information about the pattern of differences in summary statistics, such as a set of means. That is, a graph can make it easier to see which conditions tend to differ on the dependent variable. Graphs can also convey information about the shape or distribution of the data. That is, they can also be used to indicate such things as how the scores were spread about the means in the different conditions. I would like to concentrate on the most common types of graphs used in research papers. Line graphs show dependent data and trends over time. Scatter graphs show relationships between variables. Now let us have a look at how the same data can be displayed by different types of figures. Whichever visual you use, the significant thing about them is that data presented should be discussed in the text and not just represented. If data are important enough to present in tabular or graphical form, they are important enough to discuss. Think of yourself as somewhat like a tour guide to a new city. Your task is to help visitors, that is your audience, to know where to look and something of what they should note. So, let's take a look at how this tip works in reference to the figures on the slide. First, you draw their attention to a building. Figures A, B, and C show the mean number of correct answers in an intelligent test under conditions of noise and silence by 3 age groups. Then tell your audience something about what to note about this interesting object. The main point being communicated is that whereas the 3 age groups did not significantly differ in their performance when working under conditions of silence, the age group of 41 to 55-year-olds had much more trouble keeping up their performance with noise than did the younger participants. However, no guide is ever going to be able to say absolutely everything that there is to say. Similarly, you do not need to discuss every item of the table or every feature of the figure. Your goal is to draw attention of an audience to the main points of interest. Let me now turn to the issue of APA standards for visual aids. The standards for good visuals are simplicity, clarity, continuity, and information value. To ensure that your visual communicates most effectively and conforms to APA style, think of these questions. Is the figure necessary? A good figure augments rather than duplicates the text and conveys only essential facts. Is the figure simple, clear, and free of extraneous detail? A good figure is easy to read and easy to understand. Make sure that lines, labels, symbols, and so on are large enough to be read with ease, and the purpose of the figure is readily apparent. Is the figure carefully planned and prepared? Follow the given tips. Tables and figures are numbered consecutively with Arabic numerals. Give every table and every figure an informative title. The title should describe concisely what it is supposed to show and should be understandable without reference to the text. In addition, it should be as brief as possible. The title and the number are generally placed above the table, while figure caption must be placed below the figure. Put notes beneath the table or figure to explain any entries or features that are not self-explanatory. Tables may have 3 kinds of notes placed below the body of the table: general notes, specific notes, and probability notes. A general note qualifies, explains, or provides information relating to the table as a whole and ends with an explanation of any abbreviations, symbols, and the like. A specific note refers to a particular column, row, or cell. A probability note indicates how asterisks and other symbols are used in a table to indicate p-values and thus the results of tests of statistical hypothesis testing. Each type of note begins flush left on a new line below the table. Here you can see an example of a general note. The next issue to think about is academic English used for describing visuals. Here are some useful phrases for introducing and explaining visuals. To conclude, let us summarize the material I have presented so far. A slide helps people understand visually what you are describing verbally. If a visual distracts the audience's attention from what you are saying, it's useless. A presenter is the focus of a presentation, not visuals. PowerPoint is not for writing paragraphs. It's for getting and keeping the audience's attention with the main points and illustrative details. Stick to the rule of 6, not to overload slides with too much information. Think about the number of visuals you want to use. Don't overdo. Check whether a visual really shows what you are saying. Your visual should be clear and concise, providing a stimulating addition to your spoken words. Ensure your audience can read the visual. Make your visual as clear and easy to understand as possible. Give an audience time to understand what they see before you start explaining the details. Next, give brief verbal summaries to lead an audience to the main patterns and exceptions. As a final point, I want to come back to the slides I presented you at the start of my lecture. Can you find and comment on the most common mistakes made on the slides? The immediately evident disadvantage that concerns both slides is inappropriate use of color. Note that we should avoid using red or green for text or highlighting. In addition to this, the color of the text and that of the background of slide A are similar. It makes much of the data presented on the slide unreadable. Slide B illustrates a number of common mistakes that deal with using text. First to be noted is slide overload. Avoid using continuous text. Create bullet points which are clear summaries of your key points. It is not necessary for bullet points to be complete sentences. The next mistake to consider is a combination of forms of emphasis and headings. Uppercase, italics, and use of different colors may be difficult to read on screen. For a clear and simple form of emphasis and headings, use bold. That completes my lecture. For more detailed information, see some useful references. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.